Welcome to another episode of the Scannell Agenda. Today's date is February 5th, 2018. And this is show number 76, entitled, "It's a Common Thing to Run for Pope." So I don't know if the news is true, but our Pope is going to resign. So, anyway, I think that as a matter of policy, in any church, the Catholic Church, the Protestant churches, or any organization, I think the policy should be to call the cops, because that's their job. If anything goes south and someone's misbehaving, that's not really a very good word, but if someone's committing the crime of the century and being a pedophile, I would think your organization should want to get the person thrown in jail and get them out of society, and not in any way try to protect them or coddle them. I think the root of it all is perhaps that over the centuries, maybe the Catholic Church has been a safe ground for some oddball people. They can, let's say homosexuals, not that that's that odd these days, people accepting of that, but many, many, many years ago, it was grounds for all kinds of terrible things. So, as I mentioned on one of the other shows, I think when I was a little kid, I think it was like maybe I was in 3rd or 4th grade, going to the Holy Trinity School, I was really thinking of being a priest. And then I got my mind changed by girls, basically, because I found out about all that. Anyway. And when I was even younger, when Kennedy was assassinated, I had vowed to become the president. This is little kid stuff, but it kind of sticks with you. That was political. This is the atmosphere I grew up in, was sort of political. It could have been more political, I suppose. Mom and Dad worked very hard. And then on the side, they, especially my dad, as I say, was an activist. He said, no, I was not an activist. He was just a volunteer. Okay, so I grew up in that atmosphere. So I think I'm overly political in the same way that some people are overly, if it's possible, kind of like an overboard sports fanatic. But most of my life, I've always worked and kept my politics, like my dad, as something extra on the side that you do. Something important, though. Golf to some people is very, very important. Excuse me. So anyway, I went to the boat show, and the boat show was very good. And there's an article in the paper. I saw some of these boats. This paper is the Sunday edition. Yesterday's paper. Today's Monday. And so I saw these boats here, cat boats, and a new boat is coming out, got very good press coverage. So I like to go to that when I can. And I wanted to give a plug, I don't know if this is wise or not, to 5200. It's called 5200 in the boat building or boatyard work. And I had been tearing apart my boat, and I was not surprised that this 5200, now this is 5200 marine sealant, it's a 3M product, and it was bonded to some wood. And boy, that stuff is just one of the best products I've ever seen in my whole life. And when I do my boat design work, a lot of the work is technical about how to put things together. And the 5200 is just an excellent product. And that's one of those things we should be teaching in school. boatyard work. And you can have people teaching about all these different epoxies and polyester resins and fiberglass. And you see, what we really need is a marine technologies educational program in this country, both on Cape Cod and also the whole country. And that dovetails, or can dovetail, with something that I've been calling future fishermen of America. So I think that what we need to do is start the future fishermen of America here on Cape Cod. And this can be done through all kinds of different organizations, churches, schools, you name it. And it would go with marine programs, marine technology educational program. And then what would happen, I'm hoping, would be this, that we shift over from foraging as a fisheries management base. And we shift over also away from exclusive fishing rights for just a few people. And then we shift over towards the market quota system, a value price, as Fred Jennings called it. And the floating marine laboratories. And we got to cut out this habitat destruction. All this stuff, all these changes that we need to get into, which, you know, the newspapers are not savvy to, really. They don't want to listen to me. Cape Cod Times. We get along like oil and water. Too bad. As I say, I used to deliver the paper. I think things were a little different way back when we had a two-party system instead of the oligarchy-dominated system that we have now, which affects everything. So anyway, the boat show was good. There's a lot of marine technologies going on Cape Cod. I think the thing that really stole the show from me was, well, there was a Chamberlain rowing skiff that I really liked. But the Cape Cod shipbuilders and a woman, Wendy, she worked there, third generation boat builder. And I think they're the oldest fiberglass boat shop in the country, right here. And that's part of Cape Cod claim to fame. That company's, they're building a lot of beautiful boats. They build a lot of wood boats, a lot of fiberglass boats. And as you know, I built boats. I was on the crew building boats on Nantucket, Sanford Boat Company, building the same boat on another crew, and boatyard work for most of my life, off and on. That's what I'm doing now for a part-time job. So I'm running for Pope. It's a common thing. It's a common thing to run for Pope. I guess in some circles it would be a common thing. You know, what's this? It's just a little cardinal over here. And I don't think he can vote. It's just a statue. But the cardinals will do the voting. So there is some semblance of a democracy there, but I think it's just it's not my style of a democracy. And I think Jesus would side with, hey, let's take the whole Christian church into a high-level, super high-functioning democratic organization, wherein, as with a clubhouse, you would elect a clubhouse director, so everything wouldn't be chaos. You'd, as representative democracy goes, it would be run by people that were entrusted to manage. So that would be my platform, is democracy for the church. Now, I was raised by the nuns, and I mentioned that, but these nuns, I think, under their breath would be kind of irritated with being second-class citizens in the church. So I would have to agree with them. And, a lot of these nuns are very educated, and sometimes you might say on average more so than the priests I'm not sure about that, but that's what I heard. So call the cops should be in any organization, too. There should be an effort to sting those who are pedophiles in society, whether they be in any organization at all. You want to get them out. And kid bait is a healthy thing, and I know because I was bait for finding out one of these culprits, and that was at Camp Cathedral, but I was never inappropriately accosted by anyone in the church ever. I've always said my church experience doesn't have any of that stuff. All right, so I think it is a problem that has not been totally gotten after yet. So as your Pope, I would be interested in getting people together and putting that on the table and changing the policy. Married priests, that'd be fine. There was a couple, two people that I think, there was a beautiful nun when I was a little kid. And then Father Hip, I think it was, nice guy. And they got together and eloped. Not much was said, but I was very happy about that because I knew both of them. They were both just fine people. But the restrictions on the sexualities in the church should be looked after, and it should be importantly so, what would Jesus do? And as I was talking with somebody today, I said, in these little kids, you can see how effeminate some of the little boys are, let's say, or maybe on the other side of the gender spectrum, little girls might be playing with the trucks and all. And there's something God-given about all that I can't really fathom why people would think that it's not just God-given, similar to being a left-handed person. And I don't want to get into whether all this stuff is a neuroses or whether it's a problem or a fault. I would say no. I would say God makes everyone differently. And we all have different gifts. That was my theme when I was teaching Sunday school over on Nantucket. We all have to find our gift and help other people to find their gift and then polish up that gift. And I told the kids back then that my gift was being able to get into a political fight and do that kind of work. And I knew that was true back then. I knew that when I was very young. And that was a chosen vocation of mine, as fishing was too. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about the train crash that just happened. There was a train crash, and this is a derailment. I'm not going to get all into that, but with modern systems, and this is today's paper, but with modern systems of rail, I call it rail, but a dovetail track would be called rail, but it's actually kind of a maglev, let's say a 7-foot wide dovetail, flat surface, and then your train would wrap around this, and it would be basically impossible to derail it. You'd have to rip apart the whole track to derail this thing. So I think we've got to really look into leapfrogging with our technologies. And thank heavens we have not rebuilt the rail system in an ultra backwards way, in a dinosaur way, because that would be, what a disaster that would be if we did that, and then we find out through this design work of mine that this tripe system, as I used to call it, I now call it the green grid T. What if we went ahead and rebuilt all these old systems, and it would be like building an old wooden boat in a traditional way? Man, you're going to have a lot of problems, even if you rebuild a beautiful old traditional boat. You just, you set the clock again, and that thing's going to be working and wearing out and everything else. But if you build modern, let's say a modern boat, which is my way of thinking, West system or hot molding, And what you've got there is something that's really going to be safe and last a long time. Yep, the nuns, I'm telling you, they really hit home on some things. They said, and they taught us kids right. And one of the big things that I learned was their message about wherever God puts you, do God's work. Do it wherever God puts you. And they listed the worst places to be, and I've been there. And that really helped me, their little messages. Of course, you had religion for 40 minutes a day, you know. So that really gave me a jump on life, I think, growing up at Holy Trinity. And I'm 60 years old now and running for Pope. I don't think I'll be recognized, do you? No, I mean, I taught Sunday school. I was an altar boy. That's not much of a resume. But they can pick, actually. I was taught. They can pick anyone they want. They can pick a woman, and it doesn't have to be Catholic. They could pick a Jew to be Pope if they wanted to. They, the cardinals, can pick anyone they want. They're not restricted. I was pretty surprised about that. And I read a book called When in Rome, and it told of this Pope Stephen VI. I think it was the sixth. And he had dug up the previous pope. This is around the year 1000. And then he put him on trial and overturned found him guilty of heresy. And then therefore that allowed him to overturn the previous pope's appointments. These appointments were worth a lot of money. So I don't know what you think about that, but I guess it's true that there has been a lot of problems. And then, of course, the Reformation came along and helped out quite a bit with stabilizing Christianity, I think. So that was a very good movement by Martin Luther, etc. But I think it should be ongoing. I think reforms should always be ongoing in the Christian body of Christ. So I think all charity assets, such as church assets, should be taxed. But then the tax, I believe, should be discounted by 99%. At least we would have an ability to, let's say, monitor the deal, so to speak. And with the town nurse-based system, that would all play in. Because I see churches all over the place now that are run down. Like there's a church in West Howard, it's a Baptist church on Route 28. I look at that, and I've looked at that for years, and I've said, you know what? Between that building and the building behind it, which is kind of an old building, a community center, they tried to do something with it years ago, but it's sitting there boarded up too. Now this would be perfect for a clubhouse and for disabilities. But you know, we're wearing these straitjackets, and these agencies have everything tied up, and nobody talks about reform of social services or societal services systems, as I call them. Nobody really talks about all these reforms, but the churches should be front and center on all this. But I think the problem with the churches is that we prefer that the government do this work for social services. I think that's a major problem. So as your Pope, I would want to restructure all these social services back in line with some church Christian participation, environmental org participation. And that backbone would be, of course, the town nurse-based system, town nurse boss, where you have small elected bodies of 7-man board for a town nurse board. And then you've got a 25-man board for an oversight board, which would be a separate elected board. And then you've got 3 ombudsman moderators, which would be lawyers. They'd be required to be lawyers so they could do their work there. But all this social services stuff has got to be re-engineered, including Christianity has to be re-engineered from the perspective of what would Jesus do. And not from a perspective of what's easy for me if I'm a pastor. And that's the way we're going now. They want the easy life, these pastors and these priests, and I don't like that. I remember years ago I worked on an abortion tax, plant a tree. These are some of the toughest issues in the world to work on. Population control, birth control. These are the toughest issues in the world. Oh, it's just unbelievable. And these things don't get handled, and they need to get handled. So, but I would say call the cops if there's any problem with anything. That should be the battle cry. And then these people should be punished severely that get into anything evil like that. How about those patriots? Oh boy. So it's kind of disheartening to talk about some issues. It really is. Patriots lost. So congratulations to the Eagles, Philadelphia. But anyway. All right, let's shift gears here again. Let's talk about the border zone. Now, we could have churches down there on the border zone, and I would strongly advocate the dry out places and centers. They say, oh, we need more beds. Well, we could make a lot of beds down there on the border zone. Give me some burlap and some eelgrass. I'll give you a bed. No problem. So we need to re-engineer the border with Mexico so that we don't spend all this money on Donald Trump's wall, which I don't like to disagree with Donald Trump, but I have to, because the wall is a bad idea when you compare it to the border zone concept. Now, the border zone concept is such that you would have several layers of security. The first layer of security would be a simple border fence, and it would be cheap. And I have it designed as a pipe, about a 5-foot diameter pipe with some razor wire on some stands, and that would go down. That might be about 60 feet away from the actual border, which might have a simple fence. So you'd have to go over one fence, you'd have to go over the second fence, and over a road. And let's say now you would be in the territory of, you have just broken into a jail, because these would be, as I've got it designed, this better way for a wall. As I have this designed, anybody coming into this country illegally on the border would be actually breaking into a county jail, and the land would be leased from the federal government to the counties. And you'd have these ribbon prisons, I used to call them, all along the border. Now, there's a lot of thousands of miles of border, not just the Mexican border. So we have to think now about securing all the borders in the country, as well as the sea borders. So you want to have a common theme. And I would say that common theme would want to be effective and cheap security. And a wall won't give you effective security because you can tunnel over it or catapult over it. And if there's no one there to be the night watchman and the day watchman, if there's just nobody there, then you're going to be able to foil any mechanical system like a wall. It's just a fundamental fact of life. A wall, I could overcome a wall and get through. And then where are we at then? You can either tunnel over it or go over it or go through it. It's just too expensive, I think. So to save money, you'll have this basic chain link fence, and then you'll have about 60 feet away, you'll have this tube or pipe, which will be capable of running drones through the pipe. That's the point of the pipe. You can run drones through it. Not so much water, but just a lightweight pipe that would carry drones that could fly, drones that could drive, drones that could do anything you want to do. They'd have a camera. It would be like automated military presence drones. So you really would have a tough time getting through our border with this border zone system. Now you got the first fence, which is very cheap. Then you got a roadway, and the Army Corps of Engineers would be in charge of that roadway. And then you'd have your pipe fence with the razor wire. Now when you're inside that, you'd have about 820 feet or so of a golf course, I call it. It would actually be sort of similar to a DMZ. And then after that, roughly a 900-foot setback, as I have it designed, then you would have a wall or buildings with a photovoltaic or PV systems. Very cheap, but very much producers of value. So your actual security will be the buffer, 900-foot area, lots of cameras, lots of open space. I call it a golf course, but you know, that's a little bit of a stretch. Now then you'd have your county jail systems or your city jail systems and or where we could send people to dry out, where we could send people to learn a trade, and you might have community colleges partnering and churches partnering down in this area, and also the AmeriCorps people with heavy involvement from the AmeriCorps and expanding them, all for this border zone concept. So you add up your price of the wall, let's call it $10 billion. Now the stuff I'm talking about doing, the expense quite a bit would be your support for the counties, your federal support for the counties to do this, but I think your counties would find this to be a very advantageous way to go. And I don't think any state prisons should go there, and I don't believe that this should be inclusive of that. So that's the border zone. Now it would also be a 3-layer zone. The next layer in from the county jails, et cetera, would be your, there'd be some transportation such as the green grid T tripe system that I talk about. That'd be inland, at least a couple miles inland of the border. Setback, I'm sorry, not inland. And then you would have a manufacturing zone, and then you'd have security, basically, because what we want on that border zone in particular is guest workers and manufacturing plants down there on the border zone. And that might be a good jumping off place for you if you're a foreign worker and you do your time, so to speak, at some of these manufacturing plants. And then if you want to tour the country, the USA, bring your family, have a vacation, I think that should be facilitated. But I'm not for loading up the whole country with lots and lots of imports from other countries. But if we do so, then, as Donald Trump would say, I want them vetted, very, very extreme vetting. So that is the Scannell agenda. Thanks for watching.